And we're live. Welcome back, everybody,
Live.
to AJC and the Web Devs. We have returning guest, Dev Agrawal. What's up, buddy?
How's it going? At this point, you might as well call it AGC and the Web Dev.
Oh, singular dev with the web dev, you mean?
Yeah. Most people just get confused at that. But yeah, I get what you mean. Thanks for having me back on. It's a lot of fun having these conversations every now and then.
Yeah, for sure, man. You sent me a super nice New Year's message saying how much you love our web chats, and I very much enjoy them too. I was saying last time you were on that, like, you were plugged in to the web ecosystem now at the level that I was like 2 years ago
Hmm.
and no longer
Yeah.
am. So I need people like you to help
Hmm.
fill me in because I don't know what's going on anymore.
I mean, hey, in 2 years of time, it might be flipped again.
Yeah, well, I'm probably not going back. I'm probably gonna stay where I am. In 2 years, we'll need to find the new young upstart, and he can educate us
That's
both, or
fair.
she.
Yeah, you've jumped around quite a bit, like web and Web3, AI. It's like you've been on the hot trends, and I've
I
been on like
have.
I've
I was
I've been
interested.
like keeping them away as much as I
Yeah,
could.
I will tell people though that I was interested in crypto and AI far before they became big trends. I
Yeah.
was interested in them before I even learned how to code. So it's you could look at my history and be like, he just hopped on the Web3 bandwagon, and then when Web3 crashed, he got on the AI bandwagon. And it's like, no, actually, in 2019, I wrote a blog post about GPT-2. So suck it.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult to see like the small minority of people who jumped on something before they were cool.
Totally. Yeah, but you've been on the solid bandwagon now. You're on the core team, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I very much jumped on it when it became cool. So I don't get that. Uh I guess I don't know if it still counts as like maybe at some point if Solid gets big, it gets a lot of adoption, then I get to say that okay, I wasn't pretty early. But in terms of like mindshare, in terms of impact on the ecosystem, I definitely got there like once it started like its golden
When did
age.
you when did you start doing solid?
um I would say like late 2022 is when I heard about Solid. I started looking into it and I tried to like understand some of its concepts.
Hmm.
Early 2023 is when I started my first Solid project, like just a random side project to
Hmm.
um, explore some of the like see what it is, how it's different from React, and also Solid Start, what it's trying to do compared to Next.js and other things like that. And so yeah, early 2022, sorry, late 2022, early 23. Um, basically, like around the times Theo was talking about SolidJS a lot because that was my
That's
entry
cool.
point.
Yeah. For me, I have a hard time pinpointing when solid became cool, if it's even cool at all yet. Like, because I had him on
Yeah.
FS Jam in November of 2021,
Mhm.
and at that point, I felt like it was starting to
Damn.
become cool. But like most people probably
Yeah.
didn't even really know about it then, relative to now.
Mhm.
But in 3 years, more people will know about it relative to now. So it's like,
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting though. Ryan posted this. They've been number one every year they've been on the JS survey in terms of most loved framework for
Mhm.
4 years in a row. Since they have
Yeah.
entered the chart, they have always been number
Mhm.
one. I didn't realize that until now. And I thought that was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's a really nice metric to look at. And yeah, it's like to some extent like I also like cannot be very happy about that because to some extent it's just a sign of having a small community. Like when you have a small community, you just have a community of enthusiasts. And when you get as big as React, you have people that are being forced to use React, so the number automatically goes down. So
Sure.
like it's a very exciting metric. Like there's a lot of good things about that, but it's also like it's tough to like be like to gain any real sort of like a sense of achievement out of that metric.
Yeah. Yeah, but even the fact that it's all, a group of enthusiasts who love it,
Yeah,
even having a group of enthusiasts
that's
who
true.
love it
Yeah,
is itself an
hmm
accomplishment because it means someone's using
for
it.
sure.
Because you
Yeah.
get a whole bunch of people to
hmm
use something and then they all say it's crap.
Yeah. hmm Yeah. Actually, I think I can pinpoint like when Solid became cool, right to when Angular started thinking about adopting signals, because
Mm,
Angular is the biggest framework that adopted signals. Um, Other than Vue, which like kind of already always had signals, it just like had to
mhm.
expose them out. But Angular is the one like that really brought out all the discussion from like all the big players about signals. And right now, like you go to you look at conference talks, you look at YouTube videos. If it's about signals, it's about Angular. So
Really? Hmm.
I think, yeah, that's what I would say. Like I was looking at CFP submissions for Momentum. That's the conference I organize or I help organize. And there were like 5 proposals for signals, and all of them were for Angular, obviously, because like Angular is the one that is used in big companies that people go to conferences for, and people talk about in these like non-web dev communities and ecosystems. So obviously, if something new comes there, then everyone's going to know about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of had a similar thought actually when Brandon started building analog. It was like, oh, Vite
Mhm.
has hit the Angular community. That must mean it's finally
Yeah.
arrived. Yeah.
hmm Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned conferences. You're also doing a conference talk at Code Mash. You want to give that a quick plug?
Yes. Yes. Code Mash is next week in Sandusky, Ohio. It's one of my favorite conferences of the year because they do it in Kalahari Resort, which is it's the biggest indoors water park in Ohio. So it's a
What?
lot of fun.
It's a
Yeah.
tech conference at a water park? Can I
Yeah.
go?
Please do. Yeah. Code Mash. That conference is another one that they do it at Kalahari. Um, there's probably one or two other. But yeah,
Is it
Code Mash is
snowing
one of
in
my
Ohio
favorites.
also?
Oh, 100%. It's snowing in Kansas, so it's definitely snowing in Ohio.
Yeah,
It's
we
been
just got
snow
a
covered here for 3
huge.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, we had. I'm sure you were also hit by. We were hit by a
Yep.
huge storm like 2 or 3 days ago. We're gonna have snow on the
Yeah.
ground for like the next 10 days because it's gonna be below freezing essentially the whole time.
Yeah. Same. We've had snow here for the last 3 days. Honestly, I kind of miss the Cincinnati's infrastructure of like immediately cleaning out the snow from sidewalks and roads as soon as it happens. Uh,
Mm,
Here, it's just there. Like no one really bothers cleaning it out, which is really interesting to
bummer.
see after living in Ohio for 6 years.
And I bet you pay the same amount of taxes for both.
I'll have. I think I pay a bit more, honestly.
Well, there you go. It's going somewhere
Yeah.
to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed my paycheck got like just a little bit smaller as soon as that it switched from uh, Ohio to Kansas. But anyways, yeah, Code Mash. It's a fantastic conference. It's a pretty big conference. It's like it's one of the it's gotten smaller since COVID, like every other conference, but it's
Yeah.
one of the biggest ones. Obviously, it's inside a water park. It's not a web dev conference. It's like a general software dev conference, multi-track, 2 days. Chris, how's it going? Long time no see.
What up,
Um,
Chris? Thanks for joining.
yeah, 2 days of workshops and 2 days of talk, or is it 3 days of talk? It's also kind of a family conference where people bring like their kids. They have like a kids mash section where it's kids related sessions or
Sure,
sessions
yeah.
specifically for kids.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a lot of fun. Obviously, there's an indoor water. You're gonna have access to an indoor water park for 5 days. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and my talk is called "Building Asynchronous UIs Without a Hassle." So I'm gonna be talking about how like normally with frameworks we have access to synchronous state management, which is pretty good. We have a lot of like patterns around that, but when it comes to async, we always have a lot of problems, like race conditions, like a bunch of different states that we have to represent. And um, like we try to find patterns to make that easier, but eventually I think now we have settled at some patterns that make it much simpler to deal with asynchrony. And these patterns are specifically suspense and transitions. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, what they are, how React implements them, and how Solid implements them.
Yeah, I want to just stick on this just for a quick second because this is something I used to be interested in, but I always felt like I didn't really have a good handle on it. Because stuff like suspense, I feel like it was kind of a thing that if you're someone who always used frameworks, I feel like you wouldn't
Mhm,
necessarily have to use because we baked into like frameworks. So is that kind of
mhm,
your read as well? That basically is people who use frameworks and get suspense automatically. There's people who write
mhm,
raw React have to like figure out suspense. Is that kind of
mhm.
right?
So so you can think about it, yeah, if your framework that lives like outside of React, like Remix, uh Remix, like essentially it builds things like suspense and transitions outside of React, like on the router level, so you didn't
Ah.
need it inside in the React
So do
level.
they
So
not even
yeah,
use the actual suspense? They would write their own stuff?
so they did use the actual suspense
Mhm,
mechanism. So you do need like some level of like suspense within React that you can hook into.
mhm.
um, how do I let me think about that. How do I want to talk about this, because it's a very interesting tricky topic that I've also like as I was trying to build my demo for the talk, like I've also kind of like gained some, I guess, different insights or different perspectives, because I was trying to build something uh, without a router, without a data fetching library, uh, and in two different ways, like with suspense and without suspense, and trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So it's more like you can do your asynchronous management completely outside of React, which is what something like Remix would do, or something like Relay would do, one of those like data frameworks or async frameworks. And then all the state would be piped into React, where you just use it. So from that kind of perspective, you don't necessarily need suspense. React Query is another example where you use React Query for all your asynchronous stuff, and that gives you that solves some of the problems for you, but not all of them. You still have to deal with all the different loading and error states yourself. um, what suspense basically does, it brings a lot of those patterns within React. So if you want to build a framework around it, it gets much easier to do that, because um, you can now just like directly expose async things to React instead of handling them on your level. I don't know how much sense this is making. Probably not a lot.
It's making sense to me because I already have the whole suspense 101.
Right.
The easiest thing I think to get
You're not
people
in
on
suspense.
on board with it, yeah, right, is just like it's how you get your loading
Hmm.
spinners in there
Yeah.
in a simple way. That's like the
Hmm.
most basic definition I usually gave of suspense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to like talk about suspense in a way that uh, it makes asynchronous consistency a default. Like by default, it removes all the async like edge cases, weird things that we have to do, and makes them as simple as synchronous states that we have to deal with. So let me actually uh, share my screen and get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. I always enjoy hearing people's talks and things like that because
Right.
I've given so many talks myself, and it's a fun process.
Yeah. So this is how I kind of trying to explain it. It's like you have these synchronous states A, B, and C, and you have like
Uh, Your lagging is getting a little worse, Dev. You
oh,
just you're dropped out for about the last 5 to 10
okay,
seconds.
okay. How's it now?
Yeah, you're
Is it better
back.
now?
And Chris,
1, 2, 3
and Chris
testing.
is saying that
Okay.
suspense is a little bit like
Yeah.
Redwood Cells and Astro Islands, but different.
Hmm. Not sure about that.
It's true for Redwood Cells. I don't know if it's true for Islands.
Redwood cells
Redwood
is
Cells
okay.
it's a built-in convention where basically it gives you a pre-built component
Hmm.
that separates your success error loading
Right.
states. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Got it. Yeah. It's so in that sense, it's actually, I would say it's the reverse of that. So cells is like what I'm describing here. It's like if D is a state that like requires fetching some data from the server, you have to deal with like the loading state and the error state. So for each of these asynchronous states, you have two additional things to deal with, the loading and the error right here.
Hmm.
So this is what you were talking about, like with Redwood cells. Like every time you have a cell, you have a loading and an error component with it. Or like if you're using React Query, you have to deal with the loading and the error status, and then you deal with the data itself, right? So every time you have one of these, you have these two additional things that come along with them. So in like, I have a couple different examples of like you reach D and maybe from that point you go to a different E state. So then you have a loading state in between. So like basically think of navigating to a page, and once you're on that page, you can navigate to a different page. Or here, you're on a page where you require two data sources, and which means you have to go through two different loading states, like one after the other. And both of them can have their own error states. And only when both of them resolve, you have this final state where you see all the data at the same time. What suspense does is it basically eliminates all of them. It makes the asynchronous state like almost the same as the synchronous state. So you don't have to deal with at all. So this is your default. You just go from C to D, or from D to E, or from C to D plus E. So all these intermediate states are removed. Like you don't have to deal with them at all. You only deal with them if you want to, and you deal with them at like a hierarchical level on your UI instead of like on your data.
So could you say that it's just like
So that's how
literally
I think about suspense.
Yeah, could you say it's literally like the async await built-in JavaScript feature then?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was going to like add some slides about like comparing it with async await and with try catch with generators. Basically, this general idea of like um, delimited continuations, or just continuations, which is like the umbrella term for async await, try catch, and the generator syntax in general. So yeah, that's basically what that's like the best way to think about for suspense. Like it does that async await kind of, it adds that async await flavor to React's model.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it, especially for JavaScript devs. If you're not a JavaScript dev, obviously that it won't make much sense. But every JavaScript dev at this point knows async await. This is actually something that I have this custom instruction prompt for when I'm using LLMs, because sometimes because of their training data, they tend to use like import like require instead of import, and like .then instead of like async await. So like I have instructions to always use the modern JavaScript stuff part, which is using async await, and then like you get really clean code every time.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I was working on this on the explanation yesterday, and like I had remembered earlier to bring up the async await comparison, but I forgot about it yesterday as I was writing everything down. So thanks for reminding me. That's a very important comparison point that I need to bring up.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm here for. I know how to frame things so that the noobs can get it. That's kind of my superpower.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sometimes like especially like being like talking to like Ryan and some of like these people, I've almost like forgotten what like new mindset is like.
Yeah, man. Ryan's the anti-noob.
Need more of that.
Ryan is the least noob person in the entire JavaScript community.
Exactly. Yeah. And I talk too much like with him, and I think too much like how he talks or how he thinks, and that's not great when I'm trying to give a conference talk or write some documentation or even like make a YouTube video.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you learn working with people like Ryan why it is required to be able to speak at that level, because it's the only way that you can compress knowledge in a way that two experts can have a useful conversation. And it's awesome. And it's like, and this is why like a lot of like some scientific papers are so hard to read. It's not because they're like loading it with jargon. That's a separate problem that lots of people do, but it's because you're trying to compress so much built-in knowledge to be able to have a higher level conversation. And when you can get to that point, it's incredible because you can do work that no one else can do, but everyone else is kind of left in the dust.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
What's up, man? Thank you for everyone who's joining. Cool. Let's start talking types. So you are a type expert. You know a lot about types. We're talking about Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid. So check him out, Ryan Solid, on the internet. Ooh, Nicky G is getting confused. Is MM my man? He's my man. So you know a lot about types. This is one of the reasons I brought you on to the show in the first
I
place. So I
think
want to
so.
talk
A
about
little bit.
the Autoshow types. So what is your journey with types, and is it related to the fact that you wrote Java?
It is not related to that, but it is like, in the sense, it made my experience of Java a little more enjoyable than it would have been. My journey with TypeScript. So when I was like in my first like couple years into JavaScript, web dev, front end dev, uh, I I started obviously with like just, jQuery. Uh, I learned a little bit of Backbone JS. Then I learned Meteor, which is where I spent like about uh, about like a whole year, and like I built a lot of like full stack stuff with it with Meteor JS. It had a big impact on my entire trajectory. Even like
Was
to this
was
day,
Meteor was
I
Meteor
talked
written
a
with
decent bit
TypeScript?
about. It was not. No, this has nothing to do. This is like before
Okay,
TypeScript. Um,
gotcha. Okay.
but after Meteor, I started learning Angular because Angular 2 had just come out, and
Mhm.
it was like obviously the biggest framework at that time. Um, like it was kind of neck and neck with React, and the whole problem of like going from Angular 2 to React was like Am I back?
Yeah, we lost
53.
you for a second. You were just
Check,
talking about
check.
Angular 2.
Okay. Right. Angular 2. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, when Angular 2 came out, Angular was like the biggest framework. Uh, the transition to 2 is what like led to its downfall and like gave React kind of the throne.
It's true,
But
yeah.
when it came out, it was the biggest framework. So I started learning Angular 2, and Angular 2 defaulted to TypeScript. It was the
Mhm.
recommended way. Like TypeScript was a recommended way to use Angular. They had a JavaScript version, they had a Dart version, but they're like, use TypeScript. That's the way that we want you to use Angular. And honestly, like after the first, like it was kind of like, this was like maybe 2 years, 3 years into like my uh, like learning JavaScript, and it was a pretty fun experience. I don't remember if I had like any issues or hurdles like that learning curve of like learning what types are. I feel like maybe if I was jumping into TypeScript 4 years, 5 years into my career or into my journey, it would be a lot more difficult. But because it was so early on, or maybe there was that time where I hated it, but I don't really remember that. Another part, the other reason why maybe it was more seamless is because Angular was designed around TypeScript almost.
Yeah, that's what I
So
was gonna say. Yeah.
it was, yeah. And like later when I used TypeScript with React, it was actually a lot more painful because I had to define all the prop types myself. With Angular, because you get classes, you don't really have that. Like you don't have to define prop types separately. Like classes are types, and you just define the constructor types, maybe the types of your properties. So it was a lot easier to use TypeScript with Angular compared to with React. So, and
So someone's
this
asking about the
was
year, actually, real quick.
20,
And
yeah.
2016 is when Angular
Mhm.
2 came out. I just looked it up because I was curious. Also, you would have been like in high
Yes.
school. You would have been like a freshman.
Yeah, this was this I just graduated high school. Yeah. So this was, I think, 2017. I think, yeah, by the time I got around to it, it was Angular 4 already. They skipped 3 for some weird reason. Um, so yeah, it was like not exactly when 2 came out. It was a few months after that. So it was Angular 4 by that time. Say at 2017, I think. Yeah, and because of how Angular was kind of designed to work with TypeScript really well, it was a better experience. I really loved the autocomplete features. I was also using VS Code. I'm pretty sure it was that was also the time that I switched from Sublime Text to VS Code. So it was my first time using VS Code, first time using TypeScript, first time using Angular, and it was a pretty good experience because VS Code also came out with LSPs, and it was the Angular language service, the TypeScript
server
service
protocol.
Yeah, and they had the autocomplete features from TypeScript, which I loved. After like 2 years of just looking up documentation to try to figure and like making small typos and not knowing what I did, it was kind of a breath of fresh air having my IDE tell me what I'm doing wrong so early on. So yeah, in that sense, I fell in love with it pretty quickly. And from that point on, I tried to make sure that I still worked on a few Meteor projects, but Meteor did not have that great support with TypeScript. So I went back to vanilla JavaScript. And TypeScript was also one of the main reasons why I picked up Nest for like backend, because it was basically Angular.
It's like Angular,
but for like backend stuff.
Yeah.
So it was also one of the reasons I picked up Nest, is because of its type, because how it was also designed with TypeScript in mind. Although like today it's not that great. Today like things like TRPC take it much further. But and TRPC obviously existed back then, but I had no idea about it.
So is this why you jumped into the Create T3 app world so quickly when it came out? Because you kind of saw how it was really taking TypeScript to the next level?
Yeah, Create T3 app. So it was a funny story. Like about a few months ago, a few months before I like saw Create T3 app and TRPC, I was working on a Next.js project. It's the first time I was working on a Next.js project where backend and frontend were in the same, like server JavaScript and client JavaScript were in the same project instead of being split into like two projects with like two different Git repos or two different projects within a monorepo, something like that. And I kept running into this issue where I have some backend code and I put that in an API endpoint, and then I have to write a bunch of types around it. I have to like write all the like specifically write the JavaScript on the client side to make that as HTTP request, and then parse the JSON and then convert the types. And I was very close. I was like, I was on the borderline of like inventing a very shitty version of TRPC myself. That's the point I was hitting. And then I started working on that project, and a few months later, I discovered TRPC. Like, wow, where was this 7 months ago when I really, really, really needed it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was fully on Create T3 app hours after that.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. For me, getting into Create T3 app was the first time where I really got into TypeScript, because the the framework is set up in a way where it will not let you not use TypeScript. Like you have to use TypeScript, else it won't work. They have like their CLI had this funny little bit where they would ask you at one point if you wanted to pick JavaScript or TypeScript, like, you know, Astro and these other projects. If you pick JavaScript, it would say, sorry, that's not an option, which I thought was really hilarious.
Yeah, wrong answer, use TypeScript.
Yeah. But really, it was like you were saying, how it made you, because Angular had it built in, it made it easy for you to kind of get into it, because there was all these conventions already, and the framework itself was just built that way. So for me, that was like Create T3 app. It was already built in. It would give you the types, like your base types to start with. But what's funny is part of the reason why I wasn't using TypeScript for a while is because I was in this weird zone with Redwood, where Redwood is built on, or was at the time, built on GraphQL and Prisma, which like GraphQL itself is like a typing kind of scheme. And then Prisma was all TypeScript. You would have kind of types for like your database models. And if you had that set up with your Redwood project, you could write your front end in JavaScript, but you would get all of the autocomplete because you had a schema and a
Mm-hmm.
database model. So it already knew what your types were, regardless of whether you use JavaScript or TypeScript or not. So I was like, this is the way to go. If you have your backend typed so well that all the types get fed into your front end, then you don't necessarily need to use TypeScript on the front end. So I really liked that kind of mode because it kind of hid all of the TypeScript complexity within the framework
Yeah.
and then within your backend, and your backend types would be generated by these scaffolding commands that you would do that would give you your create, read, update, delete features for your different models, and it would just give you all that, so you wouldn't have to worry about writing any of those types.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty sweet. And also, I was a DevRel, I was creating demo apps, and I felt that it was like the rare case where you could make the case for leaving complexity out when you can, because if people want to look at your demo and learn how it works, the less stuff you can put in there that's unrelated to what you're trying to teach, the better. So if someone who didn't know TypeScript wanted to come into your demo and learn how it works, if there's all this TypeScript stuff, then they'd be like, oh no, I don't know TypeScript. This demo is now like harder for me to use and to understand. So that was kind of how I made the case. It wasn't that I was saying TypeScript is bad and people shouldn't use TypeScript. It was more like I am in a very, very specific, narrow use case where it's actually, you can make the case for why you wouldn't want it. Now, though, I'm building a production app, and obviously you want TypeScript on a production app. So I'm willing to admit now I am in a world where TypeScript is the correct solution. And so I've gone all in on it. My project has been TypeScript for a very long time now.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like the perspective on demos, because I feel like oftentimes when I jump into a new code base, even if it's a demo and I'm trying to understand what it's doing, like I often find TypeScript is helpful to me, and when it's not there, like I have to do more work to understand what it's doing, rather than if there were a couple type definitions that I could look at.
So by looking at the
so
types,
yeah,
that helps to understand the project.
It not just understand the project, but also like navigate around it. Like for example, if like across two different files there's two different variables that don't seem related at all, but if they have the same type, like it immediately gives me a lot more information that okay, either it's the same object that's being passed from here to there, or like they have the same source, or like I know what properties are available on this, or why this is being used here. So it adds a lot more like context to whatever I'm looking at, like just having that knowledge of what data type this is, what properties it has, and beyond that, like what is it named, like just having that name of the type, because the name of the type might be different from the name of the variable. So it's like instead of just the name of the variable, you now have an additional piece of context, like this is what the name of the type is. Now obviously it can get a lot more complicated, because like if I jump into the code base of, let's say, React Query or Tanstack Router, like those are things that use TypeScript, like tune it all the way to 11. There, like it adds nothing but complexity. Like I would say, like, okay, remove all the TypeScript, maybe it's going to make it much easier for me to understand the code. But like in simpler apps for me, so I guess, yeah, what I'm trying to say is it's probably just about preference. Like if you don't have TypeScript knowledge, it's probably going to make it harder for you to understand a TypeScript code base. If you do, it's probably going to make it easier compared to a vanilla JavaScript
totally
code base.
Yeah,
But
Chris is saying a TypeScript error a day keeps the production bugs away. Chris has been all in on TypeScript for as long as I've known him. So that was actually really useful on the show, because then we were both able to represent kind of the two sides of the TypeScript debate.
Nice.
And what's funny is I didn't know anyone who was like a serious JavaScript dev who was like anti TypeScript until I met Ryan. Ryan Carniato is, I wouldn't necessarily say he's anti-TypeScript, that's probably doesn't represent his case for it, but he is someone who tends to lean towards JavaScript instead of TypeScript. And it was when I learned that, I was like, cool, I finally have someone I can point to, like, well, if Ryan Carniato doesn't do TypeScript, Still there? Sorry for the audience out there. We've been battling a bit of computer lag here. Can you hear me, Dev? Yeah. Oh, hello. Oh no, we lost him entirely. Okay. What's up, everyone out there in the chat? Anyone who's still watching, say hey. What's up, man? We lose you entirely.
Man, my internet is just not. It doesn't.
Yeah, you gotta get an upgrade. I was actually because I have some internet issues in my own place as well. I was like
Yeah.
looking at like what would it cost to just get your own Starlink beamed directly into my unit, you know?
That'll be fun. Yeah. I do want to get an upgrade, but then I keep feeling like I don't do this often enough to justify it. Like everything else, really, it works fine. It's really like when I'm on calls or live streams. It's
Do you don't stream on
so
Twitch
like,
anymore? Do you give up on streaming?
I mean, I want to. It's just that, like, like in my priority list, making YouTube videos is higher than Twitch streaming, and so like if I cannot find time to just record YouTube videos, then streaming is like I'm not even thinking about it. Like if I'm
Well, what
able to
about
like
the
pump out YouTube videos, maybe. Yeah.
what about the Theo uh mode where you stream yourself recording YouTube videos?
Um, I think like I try to make my videos like this is not like a comment on Theo's videos, but the like if you watch my YouTube videos, I don't think those are the kind of videos that you can record while streaming because it's very much like there's a lot more editing work that goes
Yeah,
into it.
yeah. I think
Uh,
most people like. I think it's pretty rare that someone can just do a stream and bang out 5 YouTube videos that just
yeah,
require a minimal amount of editing. It's a pretty rare skill.
yeah.
Alright, we got a couple
Honestly,
like
like
questions
I
here.
should probably. I am from India, correct? And my channel name is just my full name, Dev Agrawal.
No,
Let
no
me
dot,
actually just
no
find
09 like your Twitter handle.
no, and
I think
let
Chris is saying
me
here. I
just
make
throw
my
in.
TypeScript so strict
I'll throw in the private
requires a
chat because I'm not signed into StreamYard.
yeah, that's fine. I thought this was funny. Chris says his TypeScripts are so strict it requires a congressional hearing and character witness. And then we had one more comment here about Kyle Simpson. Yeah, I know I've listened to Kyle on a lot of podcasts. I don't know if I've ever heard him go deep into TypeScript itself, but I know he's just like he's a big ECMA guy. He likes to just use JavaScript based on the standards, and he doesn't like going outside of the world of JavaScript standards. If I'm remembering his position correct, I may be totally misrepresenting because it's been a couple of years since I've listened to him, but I'm pretty sure that's why he leans into like using JavaScript, the language. He's really big on that. So once JavaScript adds types, which let's be real, they're getting there. It's just going to be a couple more years, I think. Then he'll be like, "Oh, now types are great."
It reminds me of Brian LaRue.
Oh my God, Brian is so funny. Brian is the person who I both respect the most while disagreeing with probably literally every take
Yeah.
he has ever had. Like I really disagree with his takes, but I gotta respect his knowledge and how he comes to those takes.
Yeah.
I don't think they're bad because it's like bad thinking. I think he is actually an incredibly intelligent, really experienced dude. But you know, he's all in on web components and like just stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, no build, web components,
Yeah.
source maps, no TypeScript. Yeah, it's a fun crowd to be a part of. I like to stay away from that if I can.
I'll pop this here for people who
There
want
we
to
go.
check it
Yes.
out. There's Dev's YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm probably gonna start live streaming once I can like bring myself to record some videos. Yeah, types. We're talking about types.
Yeah. Let me start sharing my screen.
Yes.
I'm gonna go over. Oh, I might have to.
Rizal, how's it going? Long time no see. Happy New Year.
We got Rizal in the chat. What is up? Good to see you, Rizal. A homie who has actually dove into Web, not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
they don't call it Web 3, but she's
Web
in the
5.
decentralized spaces, is what I would say. So,
It's
yeah,
beyond Web 3. It's Web 5. It's like
Web
a whole
5.
different level.
That's right. Yeah, I'll close that as well. So, let me start by just kind of explaining the auto show project to you first, and then I'll show you the types. And I want to get your take on it. So,
cool.
I'll just kind of go through the CLI version. There's a server as well that kind of reuses most of the same logic, but basically it's a CLI where you're able to feed it different types of content. So you can give it a YouTube video URL, a YouTube playlist URL, a YouTube channel. I've actually been doing this with Ryan Carniato's channel. I'm processing all of his videos. It's going to take me like 5 days of my computer running. And then you can give it a list of YouTube URLs. You could give it a file on your computer, or you could give it an RSS feed. And then you can give it different transcription services, or you can give it different LLMs. And then it runs through this process of different steps. So the first step is it uses this thing called YTDLP to get the metadata from. Are you familiar with YTDLP?
Yeah, Theo talks about it all the time.
Oh, does he? Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it's an amazing tool. It's a huge component of this project, actually. So it basically takes in a URL, and it can get the channel, the title of the video, when it was uploaded, the thumbnail, all of that. And then I have that turn it into a front matter block, essentially.
Nice.
So that's the first step. Then it downloads, it takes the video or the audio and either extracts the audio from the video or changes the audio to the correct form, because it has to be, for Whisper CPP, it has to be a WAV file. So this is basically either takes, if it's a video playlist URLs, RSS, or channel, it then strips out the audio, and if it's a file, then it just kind of figures out what the format is and transitions it. Then there's the transcription step. So that's when now you have the audio file, and then you feed this to either DeepGram or Assembly, which are both third-party API services, or Whisper, which runs it directly on your machine. So that's step 3. And then those kind of reach out to these different transcription files. So it's modular, essentially. And then you have the select prompt. So what this does is, this is how you tell the LLM what you want the show notes to be. So in the utils, there's all of the different prompts. So it's like create different titles, write a summary, different length summaries, bullet points versus like prose. And then there's things like chapters. So these are all the different things that you can tell it, I want you to generate kind of prompts, this based on the content. Then there's the actual LLM step. So now that it has the transcript and the prompts, you feed those together to the project. And you can actually skip this if you just want to get the prompt and the transcript, and you can dump it into a chat interface yourself. But if you want the entire process to be automated, then you use the run LLM step. And then cleanup files is actually, I used to have the project create intermediary files, especially around the transcription, where it would create you an LRC file that would then be changed to a text file. That's all kind of been removed now. I just have the transcription pass it through JavaScript variables. So this is not really that useful anymore. It's basically just cleans up the WAV file, which I might get rid of just so people can have it after the end. But anyway, so that's kind of how the project itself works. And then let's look at the types now. So the kind of first most important type is the processing options. So this is all of the CLI options that you can feed to it. So you have video, playlist, channel, URLs, file, and RSS. So those are the specific types to the the CLI, and you see here RSS. They're all strings except RSS because I have it set up to where you can pass multiple RSS feeds.
Makes sense.
Now, for something like URLs, it's a string because it's a string that is giving you the path to a file that contains a list of URLs. So that's kind of like, so there's some parts where because it's a CLI, you're passing around a lot of strings, but underneath that, there's actually kind of more complicated stuff going on. So that's kind of the first note about things that might be able to be improved. Yeah. Then there's item, which is specific to URL or specific to RSS feeds, because I have it set up to where you can pass a specific episode of a podcast. Like if you just want this, you don't want to process the whole feed, and it's a array because you can pass multiple of those.
Right.
Let's see. So let's get into some of these other ones. So actually, this is no longer necessary. I can delete that type. Hey. So now we have things like Whisper. So for different, so for Whisper, you have Whisper types, and that's going to be over here in the transcriptions. So for each of these, there's different models that you can pick. So you have tiny, base, small, medium, and then that kind of extends to things like deepgram and assembly. So that's for transcription. It's the same for LLMs. We have ChatGPT models, Claude models, Cohere models.
Nice.
And then, so then there's also things like LLM services. So for this, it kind of gives you a list of all the different LLMs. I think the one thing that I would be curious to ask you about, if I'm doing this correctly. So this handler function. So just see, where is this being used? Process handlers. Okay. So let's talk about this right here. So we got this variable. This is for the different 6 processes. This is I didn't go over each of these, but there's a different process command that is for the 6 bases, which is video, playlist, channel. So each of those has their own file, and there's this process handler that is like, here's the 6. And then there's a type that checks whether it's a valid action. So that's in here. So it checks that each one's a valid action. And then, sorry, I'm getting kind of lost in the sauce here. And then it also has this handler function type. So the handler function then checks for the options, the input, which is either going to be a URL or file path, and then the LM services, the transcription services. But it has, I've added more of these just to fix errors as it was going, because it used to be it would just return a promise with no info, and then it used to return, and then at some point it returned a promise with a string because it needed to pass like the transcription. But now it's just passing a promise, which is an object, because it returns all of the info, like the front matter, the LLM output, the transcript output. So actually,
it's basically any at that point.
What's going to happen if I, exactly. So it's kind of useless. So if I remove all of those, let's see.
You have your first error.
It'll give me these kind of errors. So
so that one's returning void.
Okay. All right. So I think I know why this is. This is because playlist, channel, and URLs, each of those are running a bunch of these video commands, basically. So the video one, this just runs each of the 6 steps. And then for something like the playlist, it will do a loop and run process video on each of them. So should there be different types for each of the process commands, or should I figure out a way to have the handler function work for each of them?
I mean, it kind of depends what's happening with the result. Like, what are you? Where is the result going? The result out of the handler function. Does it just like dump it into the terminal like as an output?
So yeah, so
Does it
that's
do?
it kind of depends whether you're using the CLI or the server, which is partly why this is a little bit confusing. So let me just
Okay.
run a couple commands to give you some examples here.
Mhm.
So let's just do a basic one like this. So this will be the simplest command you can run. It's just going to run on a single file
Right.
that we have. And so
Mhm.
this will be the file process command. So for this, it's going to return the front matter, the prompt you used, the LLM output, and the transcription. And there won't be an LLM output for what I just did because I didn't include an LLM.
Okay.
And then you get this,
Mhm.
which is the file, and then it also logs it in the terminal. And if you were to do, so let me do this with the server as well, so you can see how that goes. So if we have a server running, then we can do this instead.
Right.
There we go. So this will send a curl request with type file and file path. So it's basically takes this command and it turns the flags into like JSON inputs,
Right.
essentially. Yeah, so this
Makes
is going to
sense.
do the exact same thing, but now it's going to, let's see. Oh, that's interesting. I don't think, let me try this with.
Was it supposed to download the file or something?
No, it was supposed to, in the output here, give you everything. Hold on, I think I know why. I want to do the video one. Let's do that instead. So because there's also a front end that goes along with this. So basically the way I've been using this project the entire time has been with just the CLI, and it's all based kind of on file operations. So you would always have this content folder where you would get the file at the end. But since now I have a server and a front end, I've had to adapt all of that to basically return the info so that when you have a front end, it's an Astro front end, you can actually get that response back into the front end. Now, another complicating factor is there's also a SQLite database where things are being saved. So it may be the case that I actually might want to just say, screw all of this and just have everything be written to the database and work through that. So we see here now, we have this output, which is really hard to read, but it's basically just a JSON object. Yeah, so here we get the front matter comes out, and then the prompt, and then there's no LLM output, and then the transcript. So this is what happens for video. It should happen with file. I just need to update that code. And then when you use the playlist channel or URLs ones, it's running multiple times. So it's harder to know exactly what the output should be for that, because you don't want to just output every single video necessarily. So I think this is where what I'm realizing by just having this conversation with you is everything should just go through the database, I think, is how this should work. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one like funny thing I like about types is that it's like at the end, like just questions about types turn into questions about the architecture.
No, totally.
Quite more often than not.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking now is that so this handler,
I think like at this point, like maybe what you could have is like, actually I want to see where these functions are called, like the handler function, where they're called in your code and what happens to like the result of that.
Yeah.
So like process handlers.
So right
And
now, so yeah, it seems like actually this itself isn't even being used really that much. It's only being used for
okay.
this validate RSS action,
Mhm.
which hold on, I think I'm actually not even using this anymore because this should have been in my RSS one, but it's not even here anymore. So this might actually be just dead code.
I mean, you can
go
look
in.
at the process underscore handlers and where you're reading out of that as well.
Let me just try first, just deleting
Yeah.
this and see what happens. Oh wait, no, here that's where it's being used.
Okay.
Okay. So right here, so this is the process action, and
Right.
this, and so let's see where that's being used. So that's being
That's
used.
fine. I want to
Yeah.
look into the inside the validate RSS action, because that's the one that you're passing the handler into. So that's the one that's going to be invoking handler. So I want to look into the code of validate RSS action, I think, because we know here the result is not being used. Do
Yeah,
you
so
not like use
basically,
control click or command click, I guess?
oh yeah. I'm not a TypeScript guy, brah.
Yeah, I was just so yeah. I guess the first thing that I would say, like, what TypeScript has really changed how I navigate the code base. So instead of like using global find and file find, it's been a lot more like go to reference or search by references, because that's what TypeScript enables. So like things like command clicking, or I think it should be F12 on the Mac, where you see all the references of something. So if you try pressing F12,
I mean,
or
my
like,
F12 is just volume.
never mind. Okay, right click and it should show us.
Yeah.
Can you list? Yeah, right click on there.
Like,
Can you
so,
right click?
I
Like,
mean, right click does this.
yeah.
Okay.
Go to references. Yeah, Shift F12. Sorry.
Ah.
So Shift F12 shows you like where everything is being used, or where the thing that you're on is being used. So now validate RSS action is only used in one place, so that's fine. But if you look at like process action, like if you click at process action and Shift F12, now this shows you a list of like, okay, this is where this function is being called, or this is where it's imported, this is where it's called. So because TypeScript makes these connections through like through references, you have a much better idea, much better way to navigate the code base that's not reliant on the name of something, because your names might be different, but TypeScript has a different level of like a different dimension of how things connect to each other. So that that will take a long time to get used to, of like how you navigate your code base, especially if you're already used to your like how you're navigating right now with find.
Yeah.
But yeah, this at some point I think that's going to speed you up as well.
Cool.
But yeah, outside of that, yeah, let's get into the validate RSS action.
So the where it's being used, or the definition.
So yeah, the definition. So here you pass in the handler function, and yeah, you await the handler in here, but you don't do anything with the return value in line 645.
Because what this is basically meant to do is that it's making, because there's a bunch of extra options with the RSS, and this goes with channel 2. I'm eventually going to want to merge the RSS and the channel stuff together, because you have this huge chunk of data that comes along with a podcast feed or a YouTube channel. And there's a bunch of different options where you can do like the last 3 episodes, or the episodes on a specific date, or you can, go from the oldest to the newest, or the newest to the oldest, and you can do the oldest to the newest, and newest to the oldest, and you can skip a couple at the same time. So there's like 6 or 7 different flags that let you manipulate how you process the RSS feed or the YouTube channel. So this is making sure that you're not using options together that don't make any sense. Like, you don't want to say, I want to download all the episodes on December 30th and I want the last 7 days, because that wouldn't make any sense,
Yeah, makes sense. But the thing that so where are you calling the handler? like any function of type handler function, and using the return value, like the object that you're getting out of it. That's what I want to see. Like here, you're not using it, but what's a place where you are using it? So you have this go to the process handlers where you have like all 6 of them, the video, channel, playlist. You have that, right? Yeah,
No, here.
the second one.
Mhm.
So now click on process handlers
Mhm.
and go to find all references. Okay, so yeah, the last one here is the third one. Yeah, this is where you like in the process action,
Mhm.
you have a handler, but I guess you just pass it in. Is it the second one then? The selected action in?
So
No.
there's
Okay.
validate process actions and there's process action. So this is where having all this code written by ChatGPT gets you, because I don't entirely understand what the hell all this stuff is doing.
hmm Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm just looking for where that return value is being even used, and
Mhm.
it doesn't look like it's being used anywhere. So like even if all your handlers just return void, it's like it wouldn't really change anything. Like you're
So
returning
let,
things,
let
but
me let me go the
not
opposite
doing anything
direction
with them.
here. So I know
Okay.
that for video, it's
hmm
returned here, and
Okay.
so this has
Sure.
process
Right.
video, which is
hmm
using process option string lm servers process.
Sure.
So where is the process? So process video somewhere is interacting with
A bunch
this.
of places. Nice.
Okay, so that's what's happening here. So the
There.
process
Okay.
handler returns each
hmm
of these. The process video and process
hmm
file as well should also return the same thing. So these process video and process file are both returning all of that information about
hmm
the show notes itself, whereas process playlist,
Right.
channel, and URLs are running multiple
hmm
process videos or process files.
Yeah. So my question is that the data that process video is returning, who is looking at that data? Like, is there any piece of code that uses that object to do something with it?
So that's where the front end comes into play. So
Right. Okay.
the server, so there's the server will have
hmm
to return. So you have here process video type. So process video will happen
Okay. So
here, and
okay.
then the server
Yeah.
returns it. Yeah.
Right. So here you're calling process video directly. You're not going through the process handlers object that you had, the record that you had, that you were
hmm
using for your CLI.
hmm
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Hmm.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
this is an endpoint that an Astro
Mhm,
front end is calling.
got it. Okay. Yeah, I think in that case, maybe you would want to like kind of like come up with like a uniform representation of like what all of these are going to return. Like maybe
hmm
process video only returns one object, but process playlist returns multiple objects, like in an array. So you might have something like that.
Ah,
Um,
that makes total sense. Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's what it ends up being, and then that's what you store in the database as well. So it's the same as your database schema. That
Sweet.
might be it.
Let's look at
The other
the
thing,
deep. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing I noticed like was, uh, and this was a big thing 2 years ago. Return types.
hmm
Um, so yeah, like you're adding return types to all of your, like almost all of your functions, which is, I think usually that's considered kind of like an overkill or unnecessary, and maybe even like problematic in some weird cases. Um,
Say more about that. Why is that?
it's because, so one of the things about TypeScript is that you want to minimize how many annotations, like type annotations you're putting, and you want to rely on type inference as much as possible. So for example, even back when you were giving that Redwood example where you had Prisma and GraphQL, and because you had Prisma and GraphQL, you didn't need to write TypeScript on your own. You just had type safety in your regular JavaScript front end, right?
hmm
That's because of TypeScript inference. Like it's actually still you're actually still using TypeScript, but you're not writing TypeScript. Your IDE is using TypeScript's features like behind the scenes to give you those type safe capabilities, like type inference basically. without you even having to write it. So that's, you actually gave a very good example of relying on type inference without even having to write TypeScript. So that's actually the ideal way. That's like the close to the ideal way that you want to use TypeScript. It's like you don't want to write it. You just want to gain the advantages of it behind the scenes. Return types is one of them. So for example, here, you should be able to remove this entire colon promise and the entire definition of what it returns.
Yeah, right.
And still have it work. And if that doesn't work, that means like there might be a few small tweaks that you can make to make the inference better. But yeah, if nothing else breaks, this means that this is another way to like kind of improve your TypeScript, is that if you can remove an annotation and nothing breaks, you're probably doing something right. And that annotation didn't need to be there in the first place.
Fascinating. Super fascinating. Let me real quick. I had made a change here. Let me just for now. Let's keep this here, and then let's see. Having made that change, if I have any errors. Do you use TSC? How do you like check for just type errors in your whole project? Do you use something like TSC or other tools like that?
I mean, yeah, usually whatever development server I have running is going to report type errors. It's not going to block me, but it's still going to report type errors. Or more often than not, if I change something, like I have the file already open, and more likely than not, the issue is in that file and not in a different file that I don't have open. But yeah, when I do like VS Code lets me know, the dev server lets me know, there's like enough things running TypeScript all the time that someone is going to let me know that something went wrong. And it basically makes sure that I don't make a commit or make a PR with type errors in it. It's way more likely that I make lint errors than type errors because I don't always have the linter running.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chris is on that as well. Okay, better to let the function work it out rather than writing more types. Yeah, you want to minimize how much TypeScript you are writing and let inference do most of it.
Okay, cool. You may not know this if you're not using TSC, but it keeps throwing me this one error that's related to a node module for the Anthropic AI SDK. I wish it wouldn't do this, but I don't know how to get rid of it.
Does it not have like a like add type / the like definitely typed thing? So what you can try, go to your package JSON. I want to see what the Anthropic AI. So what TSC is saying is that this package doesn't come with types, right? The Anthropic AI SDK. What you can try to do is like npm install add types / the name of the package, and do it
like these,
exactly, like that, And if that doesn't exist, then you can like you can hack around, like tell TypeScript that it's okay, it doesn't exist. It's basically the version of any for packages. You still need the at. You need the at for Anthropic AI,
Okay.
And the full package name, so Anthropic AI /
Okay. It doesn't look like it exists.
Maybe it's like different syntax. Yeah.
Let's try this. Someone else has probably run into this. Oh, someone's mentioning no emit, just like Chris said.
I guess it doesn't have a types package, which is interesting. I thought like most JavaScript SDKs these days are either built in TypeScript or have like a separate type definitions package, which is
it's literally it's a TypeScript library.
API. What? Yeah, maybe it's just a TypeScript versioning thing.
Okay.
Like you might have a different version of TypeScript when you run TSC compared to, like, you don't have this issue in your VS Code, right? It's just when you run TSC.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's probably like TSC, a bad version or something like that.
My node manager is Volta. Let's see.
Yes. It's the first time I've seen someone using not NVM.
Dude, NVM is trash. Volta is the shit.
I don't know. I've never had a bad experience with NVM.
Weird. I've only had bad experiences with NVM. Okay, this is not super important.
That's fine.
Let's go back to our types. Okay, so
package manager. He meant not node manager. Anyways, yeah.
Package manager. I'm just using npm.
Yeah. So with types, like you want to define like obviously like these core types, like the handler function, the markdown data. Those kind of need to be there, sure. But when you're writing functions, you don't you shouldn't need to define the return types. It should just be inferred from whatever you're returning from it. More often than not, actually as much as possible. And according to Theo, that should be the case 100% of the time. You should never have return types, really. I disagree with that, and so does Primogen. But that's a whole different story. That was a whole debate 2 years ago.
Could you try and summarize their positions?
I think like Theo's position is just that you should rely on inference all the time. Anytime you manually define, you manually like add expectations of types, it might be different from what the reality is. And type inference always gives you the reality. It's like it's impossible for it to be anything different. But as soon as you add an expectation, you might like kind of like distort the view of reality. That's kind of his position. I think for Primogen, it's more about readability. It's like when you look at the name of the function, the signature of the function, it tells you that like you look at it promise void and you know that like you don't have to do any extra work to figure out what it returns.
Right.
For me, that has a very easy solution. You just hover on the name, and like the tooltip will tell you what it returns. So,
yeah, so
like now, if you
I'm just deleting
if you
all
hover on
types.
If you hover on process URLs, it says promise void. So look at that. You remove the promise void, but type inference it can still very accurately know that it's a promise void. So that's an sign that you don't need that.
So let's see if we'll do it with this one as well. It does. Oh my!
But if you hover on it, so now what it does is instead of giving you the named type, it just gives you the description. So this is one of the cases where it might be helpful to add that back in. So now if you add that back in, it just says markdown data instead of giving you that whole structure.
Okay.
So yeah, this is one of the cases where.
So if I'm returning a type of actually defined, it's more useful to have the return type. But if it's just returning information that is not actually written as a specific type, you should leave it out.
Yeah, and like then it becomes about your preference. Like sometimes just looking at the structure is enough for you to figure out what this type is. You don't need the name. Yeah.
No, this is great. This is super useful.
Also, like you have JS docs, which probably means that you can also remove the types from the parameters. Like if you remove the options, processing options, TypeScript can probably not from there. From the TypeScript, not from there.
From the TypeScript, like this.
Yeah, if you remove. Never mind. I thought it looks at the JS docs. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The JS docs has been a little tricky because there's JS doc and then there's type doc. So I'm using type doc technically, which is like JS docs that are better for when you're actually using a TypeScript project. And
interesting. I thought it was the opposite. I thought JS doc had better TypeScript support. Because I might be misremembering. But I know like there's definitely one where if you have the type definitions in your JS doc, you don't need to repeat them in your TypeScript or in your type annotations, which like now you can take that to the logical extreme and again go back to not writing TypeScript at all and having all your types in these JS doc, which is like another thing that the no TypeScript crowd likes to talk about. Like Brian LaRue talks about JS doc a lot. He's like, just use JS doc for the types. You don't need TypeScript. Again, because it eliminates the build step and it still gives you like type safety. Rich Harris has the same argument, but that's more from the framework author standpoint and less from the application developer standpoint.
Cool. All right. Well, I just got to delete a whole bunch of code. So that's always
So
nice.
another thing that this highlights, if you stay here, you see the async is underlined. I think that's trying to say that this function is not actually async. Like, what are you return? Oh, yeah, JSTalk can be moved to TypeScript types. Okay, that's interesting. See if you can quick fix that. What does it do? Oh, they just added back in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dumb. Never mind. Yeah, sometimes VS Code does the weirdest stuff.
Yeah, totally. I have been enjoying, though. I've started using the quick fix stuff. Anytime there's a type error, now that I have Copilot, it will fix my type errors with Copilot, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, a lot of time, like Copilot just generates like code without any types at all, which like it makes it only more difficult. Like then I have to tell, no, you dumbass, rewrite that and give it types.
Yeah. Okay, I'm almost done with this.
So the LLM function is another one. So you say call Olama, and you're explicitly typing that as LLM function. See if you can remove that as well. So that's the other one where you manually annotate a constant or a variable. Those are the two ones that should be inferred: the return types from functions and any of these variable annotations. And again, if nothing breaks, then you're fine.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I like about the TypeScripts is that it's just like you'll know whether you did it right or not without having to run the code.
Exactly, yeah. And then maybe like if LLM function as a type is not being used at all, you can nuke the definition itself.
Yeah, we'll see once we've done all this. We'll see where we're at with that.
Yeah, now I want to see where like that LLM function definition, is it being used anywhere? Okay, yeah, that's also a place where you can remove it from, because and now I don't think it's used anywhere, which means you can nuke the definition itself.
Well, so it's being used in this LLM functions, which is that being used here. So let me delete.
Can you remove it?
Also.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that.
And this both of these types are gone now. Bam.
Yeah.
Killer.
And if you still only have that one error, then you're doing fine.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I think that might be the same for
yeah, you can find a bunch more where you might be able to do this. And also like props on not using enums and just using the string unions.
So that was actually one of my questions. Yeah. So that's a good thing. Sounds like.
Yes, that is a good thing. Yes, avoid enums. There's a couple Matt Pocock videos about that. He can talk about that much better than I can. Honestly, I don't even remember all the arguments. I just know that I want to avoid them.
That's funny. Okay, cool. I think I'm in a good spot with that. So I think in terms of this was the only return type I kept. I think these are all.
Put a lot of effort into docs. That's impressive.
I mean, I guess it's it's one of the things. It's like I code this whole project with a very LLM heavy workflow. So every time I have it write me code, I have custom instructions that say you have to write docs and you have to use JS or type doc or something like that.
Nice.
And I don't even have the generated type docs saved anywhere. I haven't gotten to that step yet, but I'm pretty close to having everything typed in a way where I can generate the type docs.
Nice.
Doc reference, which really I'm not even going to read. I'm just going to feed back into the LLM so it understands my project better, you know?
So you have an LLM heavy workflow and you're not using Cursor.
No. No, because the way I've done it is that I like having the ability to have a conversation, like, and maybe
Mhm.
Cursor does this as well, where you can have a chat going on about your thing. So basically what I do
Right.
is when I want to build a feature, I
Mhm.
explain the feature I want to build, and then I give it the specific files that are relevant to that, and then I tell
Mhm.
it to rewrite the files in a
Got
certain
it.
way, and then it basically responds back with the
Mhm.
code, and then I make the change and it either works or
Mhm.
it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then I get an error message and I give it the error message back. I'm saying, hey,
Mhm.
the code you wrote doesn't work. So this has kind of
Right.
worked. This workflow has worked for me. I have played around with
Mhm.
Copilot. I haven't used Cursor, but I have to imagine it's fairly similar to using Copilot. And I don't know, I just like this
Mhm.
workflow better for whatever reason. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I would say like give it a try at least.
Hmm.
I think it has the chat functionality. Although
Hmm.
I've only been using Composer, where you give it a prompt and it just comes up with like changes that you can make to your files and you can apply them one by one.
What's
Of course, it has
Composer?
results. I mean, it has like it's a feature within Cursor. Like
Hmm.
Composer is um, yeah, you can add like files as context, and then it'll use those files to figure out like what needs to be changed. It can
Okay.
also like automatically detect like what files should be part of the context sometimes.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
it has a separate chat window, which I haven't used, which I think does more of what you're talking about, where you can just talk through
Uh-huh.
building a feature instead of like applying all of that. Yeah, so it has these two.
Mhm.
And of course, it has a results pouch,
As a what?
which results vouching for Cursor,
Oh, yeah.
so that's got to count for something.
Yeah, no, and, yeah, been usually really smooth. Yeah, no, I've heard lots of good things about Cursor. I listened to
Hmm.
a really long interview that they did with Lex Friedman as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's I should probably try it, yeah. Nice.
I was trying it, but then I ran out of the trial, and then I ran out of OpenAI credits. So now I'm kind of stuck. I'm just waiting for like the month to reset and my OpenAI like usage to come back.
So
So I
that's
can.
partly also, I think, why I've hesitated from using it is that I pay
Mhm.
for OpenAI and I have
Right.
the ability to have as many chats as I want with it,
Hmm.
and it doesn't use your API key because I'm just using the
Yeah.
regular chat. So Cursor, I'm assuming you give it your Open
Hmm.
API key,
Right.
right? Yeah. So
It has its own like you can just pay for Cursor, and like it's gonna use its own thing. Or you can
well, that's nice.
yeah, you can
Yeah,
add your own
can't beat
OpenAI
free.
key. Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So if I have to pay for Cursor and OpenAI, that might
Hmm.
be why I would hesitate to use it
Yeah,
because.
no, I think you can just pay for OpenAI and use your API key. That's how I want to use it. I was going to use it. It's just that um yeah, I also use my OpenAI key for some like one of uh, a random side project I was working on, and I think I might have just burned through my usage limits for the month.
Totally. You gotta get on that pro subscription
I am on the pro subscription.
for the $200 a month one.
Oh, not that. No, not that one.
Yeah. No,
I'm
no.
on the 20 a month. 200
Yeah,
a month.
that
I don't think I even use it that much to justify
yeah,
it.
the $200 one a month one, you can use O1 unlimited,
Hmm.
and then you get access to O1 Pro, which is
Nice.
a model you don't even get if you're on the free
Oh,
plan. But honestly, O1 is pretty good. I think getting
yeah.
50 shots on O1
Hmm.
per week is good for most people, unless you're like
Hmm.
really like just using it an insane amount. The O1 Pro is basically just like O1, but
Hmm.
it takes a lot longer to give you an answer, and allegedly the answer
Got
is
it.
better. Like it thinks for like 5 to
Yeah.
10 minutes before it gives you
Hmm.
an answer, which is kind of overkill and really breaks
Yeah.
your workflow, I think.
Let me see. Which one do I? Okay. Yeah. So I use. I guess I for ChatGPT I use for most of the time. I've used Owen probably a little bit here and there for some coding stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah. Oh, I've
Yeah.
barely used Owen right now, and
Well,
yeah, I'm still
O1
waiting for
versus
my.
O1
But
versus 4.0 is a big difference. I would highly
sure, yeah.
recommend if you're doing any sort
Mhm.
of coding, I would always default to
Mhm.
O1 until you've used up all of that.
Yeah, I think my ChatGPT is right now mostly used for uh, university assignments, which not mine. Of course, I'm not a student, but yeah. Anyways, that's not gonna say anymore.
That's funny. And did you use Claude at all?
I used Claude as a part of just um, the free trial of Cursor,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard a lot of good things. I think at this point I might just wanna like end my OpenAI subscription and switch to Claude, uh, both for chat and for like for coding for Cursor. I know that Copilot recently expanded their free tier and they added ability for using different models. So maybe I want to play with that as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was using Claude almost exclusively for coding until
Mhm.
O1 came out, and then I switched back to ChatGPT. I'm
Mhm.
imagining that at some point Claude is going to start doing the chain of thought, because what it does is O1
Right.
allows it to basically write an
Mhm.
outline of what it's actually going to do
Mhm.
before it gives you an
Yeah.
answer. And Rizal is saying Claude is her
Mhm.
favorite way better writing code. I mean, yeah, I
Have
felt
you
the
had
same
better
way,
experience
and
with like O1?
I find that O1 is better for more complex coding problems. Like
Mhm.
Rizal wants to know
Of
about your
course,
super
yeah.
secret gig.
I
Are you writing essays for people
it's
and just using ChatGPT?
not me. I'm not.
Okay, yeah,
ChatGPT
sure,
is the
you're
one writing this essays.
sure, yeah, that's
Yeah,
funny.
it's like I'm sure I graduated university at the exact right time. If I was there for one more year, I would have seen like the entire pandemic of students using AI for all their assignments. Honestly, I would have. There's a lot of assignments that I had to spend way too much time writing, and I did not enjoy that.
Yeah.
So it would have been honestly like a pretty good addition when I was a student.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was a music major, so I think I wrote one essay in the 4 years I was in
Yeah.
college. But Brazil's saying here
Yeah.
that you haven't tried O1 and you got tired
Mhm.
of ChatGPT. I agree, actually. I had a
Fair.
running Twitter thread of
Mhm.
every single person who was complaining about 4.0 and
Mhm.
how much it sucked. And I think Rizal was actually one of the people in that thread that I included. And O1, I felt like
Mhm.
completely redeemed them. It's really quite good. So I would recommend trying it out just to kind of see how it works for
Yeah.
your own workflow.
For
I'd
sure.
still use Claude if I want to like refactor a single
Mhm.
file or like add comments to some code or things like that. Like
Mhm.
especially because it's a lot cheaper. It's $20 instead of 200.
Yeah.
Or you can still use O1 on the $20 plan, but you get capped and like weekly
Mhm.
usage, which that always kind of bugged me because I would, if I got in a flow, I would use it a
Yeah.
lot. And then it'd be like, hey, you have 5 messages left, and then you get new messages in 3 days. I'm like, oh well, crap. Like then I'm like in
Yeah.
this weird scarcity
No more recording
mindset
for today.
around my tokens. So,
Yeah.
but you can get around that by paying
Mhm.
$200 a month, which is
Mhm.
pretty steep. So,
Honestly, what I want right now is like, oh, I need to learn how to use image models better because
mm,
one of the main things I used LLMs for is generating image for my conference slides.
mm,
And you like, yeah, I last 2 or 3 of my talks, I've used like a bunch of AI images. I started the one like that I gave in May, and then I gave a talk at React Rally. It only had really 1 or 2 images. Then I gave a talk at Dallas last month. It also had a few AI generated images. So, oh, and the one that I gave about Solid Start in November, was it October, November? I think it was October. Anyways, so yeah, I want to get better at you like generating images. And I tried ChatGPT and like a few of the extensions that ChatGPT has because I just wanted to get it easy and done, but they were not up to par. And I know there's like very deep you can go into generating images. I am just like I'm level 1. I need to be at level 7.
Cool. We should plan another stream in a couple weeks, and we can go
Let's
over
do
that.
that.
So that's something that I've done a little bit of research in, not a lot. There's like Black Forest Labs is yeah. So let me share my screen real quick, and then we'll close it out after this. So there's this thing called Black Forest Labs that I tried them out. I used their API a bit. It was really hard to get going, and I thought it was supposed to be open source, but then the way you use it, you end up just hooking into their kind of service anyway. And so it seemed like it kind of defeated the freaking purpose. So I was not a huge fan, honestly. So I need to also kind of look at the different image models available, because there's open source stuff, and then there's paid stuff, and there's like all sorts of restrictions they add to it. Like with Grok, actually, you can have it generate images of real people. Like if you want to, have a, create an image like a politician or whatever, it'll do that. But ChatGPT, it will like very firmly say, I will not generate any images of any people you have ever heard of. And if you want me to, then you can just shut up, because I'm not going to do it. So like,
I have heard about that. Yeah. People on Twitter are very proud about Grok and its image generation capabilities. I see it all the time. Maybe I should just use Grok.
It does some wild stuff. Let me tell you.
I've noticed. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, this was super duper useful for me. I learned a bunch. I got some very actionable insights. So very much appreciate you coming on and helping me out with this. And yeah, I would love to just kind of get like a regular streaming cadence going with you, maybe like once a month or so, if you want, because it's always fun chatting with you, and there's all sorts of stuff we can work on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's I guess it sounds like we have the topic for the next one.
Yeah.
Image models.
Yeah, I'll do some research on that, because that's something I want to learn more about as well. Actually, me and my wife have this thing we do where we are both we have like our kind of like character avatars that we use, and we generate ChatGPT images like based on different circumstances we've been in. So I'm a parakeet. If you look at my Twitter handle, it's a little parakeet avatar, and then she's a porcupine. And so we generated like literally like hundreds of these images of us just like in all sorts of different scenarios. And then she actually ordered like a kind of like picture book that kind of narrates our first couple of years relationship with these pictures. It's super cute, and it is very, very fun. So like, this is something that I enjoy doing, because it's something that allows me to like connect with my wife and because as a kid, I could not draw for shit. I was terrible at drawing.
Oh, I still cannot.
Yeah, so you'll agree with me then. Oh yeah, results. It's cute. Yeah, it's super cute. And so the ability to now create all this artistic work through LLMs for me is like very, very gratifying, because I could never create this any other way,
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm trying to use these for my conference talks. Is like, I know I'm horrible at designing. Like, I know I can't even like design slides for shit. So at least if I can like put a nice looking image there, like people are less like I can distract people away from my bad slide design capabilities. I'm trying to do same for my conference demos as well, where not like obviously we have things like ShadCN where you can just have your UI look good without putting too much effort. But I want to get to a point where I can also like just very easily like just come up with UIs for these demos or random mini apps that I'm building on the side without putting too much effort, and they still look good.
Have you tried
that's kind of
yet?
I have not. I've heard a decent bit about it. I'm kind of scared to try it. It probably requires like a decent bit of time investment to learn the workflows around it.
Yeah, Bolt interesting. I've only used it once, but I'm in the same boat where I want to try it more. But
the other thing is I've not used online IDEs a lot. Like I barely look at code sandboxes. I've almost never used StackBlitz. I almost always prefer like cloning locally and running. So it's like there's some level of familiarity with StackBlitz and that online environment that you need before you can like really get used to the Bolt workflows. I might be wrong though.
No, you're totally right. I got very into online IDEs in like 2021, not as like a user necessarily,
Yeah.
but just as like a proponent of them. Because I think like
Right.
because I remember like when I was learning to code, you know, like they would have been super duper useful.
Yeah.
I've told this story a bunch of times, but when I first started coding, my npm was literally broken. Like you could not run npm install because I had this really super duper weird specific edge case where I had a node modules in the root of my programming machine. And so
Right.
for some reason that broke the whole thing. So no npm commands would work or even return errors to let someone figure out what the issue was. So I went through the first like 3 months of
Yeah.
my programming bootcamp without being able to run npm commands.
Damn.
It
Yeah, I was using an online platform, so at least that. Yeah, I guess in that sense, I was like at least the learning phase, I was using Code Academy, so which is kind of an online IDE.
So Code Academy comes with an IDE. I've never used Code
Yeah.
Academy.
Yeah, Code Academy has its own like it's a like you have instructions, you follow the instructions, you write the code, you see the output, and then you move on to the next thing. And I know a bunch of different learning platforms do this. This was when Code Academy was completely free. So yeah, that was an era.
Word. Okay, cool. I think we can start closing it out here.
Yep.
Thank you to everyone who is in the chat, who's hanging out. Rizal and Chris and Nikki T and Abhimanyu, and I think that was everybody. But
All the
yeah,
chatters,
this is super fun. Anything you want to things you want to plug or stuff you want to promote before we close out?
Check out SolidJS if you haven't yet. I guess.
Solid. Yep. Yeah,
Exactly.
once I'm done processing all his videos, I need to figure out how I want to give them to him.
Actually, yeah. So there's someone in the community who like after every Ryan stream, have you seen the chapters in Ryan streams?
Yes. So this is one of the things the tool could do. So
Yeah.
I should connect with them.
Exactly.
It sounds
Yeah.
like. Okay.
Yes, definitely connect with Jesse Pence, who puts way too much effort into watching the entire stream multiple times and coming up with those chapters. I cannot
How's Penn
imagine the
spelled?
effort that takes.
How's the last name spelled?
I think on Twitter he might be Jazzy Pants. I'll just like send you a link. I'll send you his profile on Twitter.
Cool. I might.
Yeah, definitely talk to him because if you can simplify his workflow, like we all need those chapters as quickly as possible. And he like out of everyone, he would appreciate this the most.
For sure. No, yeah. Thank you for that connection. Yeah, this is why I built it, and so I want to find the people who will benefit from it.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah, very happy to see the work you're doing on Autoshow. I want to use this as well for a bunch of things, hopefully.
Very cool. All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will catch you next time.